Wheel of Genre, the show for readers who can feel that zone of evil laying down over everything. Each month we spin the wheel and land on a different idea, author, or genre, and right now we are reading Gnostic flavored fiction, including this one, Philip K. Dick's The Divine Invasion. I'm Zach, and this week I'm really interested in, a word, I feel like I heard this somewhere else, but I don't know where, but it sprung into my mind, hard fantasy. So,
Ooh.
like, there's a lot of fantasy elements in this, but it's not fantastic. We're pulling from, real world religious traditions, Gnostic, Jewish, Kabbalah, Hermetic, and we're using that as the kind of plot structure. So kind of adjacent to hard sci-fi, I'm thinking hard fantasy.
So interesting, Zach. I've never heard of hard fantasy. I'd love to hear any recommendations for hard fantasy if anyone knows any. But I'm interested. I'm so happy you saved the big noodle for me. I'm Bob, by the way. I love the big noodle in this book. My goodness, not even an important character, not even a person. But I loved the big noodle.
Yeah, the Big Noodle was great. I before we hit record, I told Bob my favorite character was the Big Noodle. He's like, I was going to start with that. We both love the Big Noodle, and it goes further, I think, than our love for carbohydrates. It's a really interesting character. Before we begin, I do have some factoids about this one. This has kind of a storied history, I guess. Maybe I should say storied reception. So Philip K. Dick himself wrote a negative review of this and submitted it to the fanzine Venom just to see if they would publish it. I thought that was like really, really, you don't hear about authors panning their own books in reviews, in fanzines. It was never ended up being published because it sounds like the fanzine folded, but you can track down the review. Apparently it's hilarious. He really, sloshes this novel, but he wasn't the only one who trashed it. Eric Davis, who, he's one of the big scholars of like Philip K. Dick, particularly around like mystical experiences, Gnostic sources. This is someone who, wrote a whole chapter in the book Future Matters, The Persistence of Philip K. Dick. He has a book in 2019, High Weirdness, Drugs, Esoterica, and Visionary Experience in the 70s, and 1998's influential Technosis, Myth, Magic, and Mysticism in the Age of Information. Anyways, Eric Davis basically just said that he thought Philip K. Dick's The Divine Invasion was the most boring of his novels, hands down. And I even found an interview with his editor at the publisher who, he was sending all the manuscripts in, and his publisher was like, structurally speaking, this thing is just garbage. He really liked it. He thought the ideas were rock solid. He's like, clearly the ideas have been worked through over the course of several years, but he did just write this book down in about 2 weeks' time and just mailed it off to the publisher. And he's like, and you can really tell.
It's funny, like finding a collector's item after a dumpster fire, and you just go, they're shining there from it when it's gone out. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about this book, but one other thing, did you know he wrote this in a month? I mean, that's not saying much because Philip K. Dick was writing lots of things really fast, but I think he took a lot more time, maybe not, but I believe he took a lot more time with Valis, which comes right before this, and this is part of the trilogy. We're in the middle of the trilogy now, and it feels like a huge departure for me. It feels like we've gone from kind of what we were calling like a bricolage or a pastiche of all of these different things in Valis, philosophy, parts of the exegesis, kind of an old story and a new story coming together into one, and now we go pure pulp. And in this story, Zach, help me because...
Well, hold on. Yeah, hold on. Because you said it feels like it's a departure. I feel like it's a return to form. And actually,
yes,
I liked this novel way more than Valis. Dun, 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 dun. But I feel like if I had to guess why this book was fast and Valis took him a long time, I would say it's because this book feels to me like he's back in the mode of Three Stigmata of Palmer Eldritch and Ubik and, those kind of fast moving, plot heavy novels. It feels like we're back in that lane, a lane he's very, very familiar with. Valis was really a deep left turn, formally speaking.
That's the departure there. Okay, Valis. So now we're back in familiar Dick territory, and we have, similar to lots of the other novels, especially if we think about Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, a lot of people are immigrating from Earth to other planets because bad things are happening to Earth. We have another story about immigration, but blah, 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 blah. The main thing is the father of Christ, the father of God, is in a car accident. He's in kind of a cryogenic chamber. He is dead, or it's an automobile accident. He is dead, but he's on ice pack, which is kind of like the setup for Ubik. Sorry, the setup for Ubik. So many Philip K. Dick books at this point. The setup for Ubik. So he is kind of suspended in between life and death in a half-life, and he's remembering a lot of these things. And there's things that he He's remembering something, Zach, and that happens to be being the legal guardian of God. God has been banished, was banished in 79 AD to another planet and is going by the name Yah. Yah is going to be given birth to, born as a regular human child, of course with special powers, will eventually remember who he is and has special guardians along the way. Many other things happen, including the big noodle, but eventually we have to come to kind of a God's own personal gnosis through the course of this book. And there is the guardian Elijah we meet. We meet also Xena, warrior princess, who is going to help him remember who he is as well. And we could talk about all of these characters one by one, and we have a showdown with a demon at the end, which I always quite enjoy in my books, Zach. Demonic showdowns.
Sure. This was a bit of a, well, you know, it wasn't a battle at the end of time. We'll put it like that. But
it was cute, though.
It was cute. Let's talk Emmanuel, because Emmanuel, I feel like, is a character who, well, he's the child. He has brain damage of a sort. He can't remember who he is, but the people around him seem to know. But actually, the thing that they're trying to do is get him to remember who he is, his status as God, as Yahweh. And to me, this matches most closely with the kind of structure that we saw in the first two books of the Gnostic sequence that we've been reading thus far. So we started off this sequence with David Lindsay's A Voyage to Arcturus and Harold Bloom's The Flight to Lucifer, both of which feature these characters who, you know, they're not embodiments of the Godhead, but they're embodiments, I guess you could say, of the spirit of humanity, the spirit of Adam, you know, trying to come to a realization about their status as spiritual beings, to remember it. And, you know, the key word here is anamnesis. So, you know, you have amnesia. You've forgotten, you can't remember. Well, anamnesis, it's a remembering of things that you've forgotten. It's an old word that goes back to Plato, and it is in use through the Gnostic tradition, and Philip K. Dick has resurrected it here. And it is exactly the structure of this book. Through games, through conversations, through encounters with various different people and animals and the devil himself, God reclaims his mental territory, spiritual territory. God becomes God.
God becomes God again. Zach, this book reminds me, going all the way back from when we were starting first on YouTube, when we were reading Dangerous Visions, and we were noticing a lot of the stories in there were about God being out of place, or God being chased out, you know, God being outside of where we would typically believe God would be, and being kind of brought down to a human level. Here, I think it's so interesting that it is that anamnesis process, extremely important to Philip K. Dick. He talks about it in many of the books we've read recently. He talks about it, the Met speech, but remembering, and it's the individual's responsibility. We've seen kind of a gray line, too, between like divinity and the individual. As one learns about themselves, they kind of have not divine powers, but it's a similar status of, I guess, unremembering. One of my favorite scenes, though, is when he gets a little piece back when he's talking to the dog. Do you remember the dog scene?
Oh, the dog scene was the first moment of this book where I was like, oh my God, we're back.
This was great. Incredible. Just comes out of nowhere. So it's quite violent. It's a sad scene. It's a very sad scene, but it's incredible. This dog is dying, and the very young boy, I think Emmanuel's only 2 years old at this point. He's really young.
He should be 10 because his dad, his dad-in-law, his legal father, has been in that coma or has been in space pack or whatever for 10 years at that point.
Oh, I thought he was still in. Okay, sorry. So he must be out at this point. Sorry. So when he goes to see the dog, he's like, what happened to you? And they have this long conversation, like, why are you here dying? And so the dog says, well, it's just what happens. It's part of the law. I will eventually have to die. And he says, we have such pointy teeth. What do you have pointy teeth for? And he says, well, I love to hunt things. Why do you hunt things? It's part of my game. I love to do it. And then he says that, aren't you restricted to the same laws? The dog asks this of Emmanuel. And then Emmanuel says, I do what I wish. And the dog says, you lie to yourself. Only God does as he wishes. And then Emmanuel says, then I must be God. The dog says, if you are God, heal me. But then Emmanuel says, but you are under the law. And the dog realizes you are not God. And they argue about God willing the law. I think it's so interesting, these little pieces of anamnesis, and especially when they're with characters that make the world seem kind of magical. As we're reading this book, the dog giving you enlightenment almost by having this it's like a koan, but you were talking to the dog to realize just through a regular conversation on the street.
Yeah, or like Siddhartha going out, from the palace and encountering like a starving man or a sick man, and having these conversations from a point of ignorance and walking away one step closer to enlightenment.
So as we can see, there's this process that we've just been talking about, but there is a lot, it seems, that's very directly Gnostic in this, just as there is in Valis, because there is a lot of false creators being trapped. There's mention of a black iron prison again. There's mention of just illusions. Does it feel unique to Valis? Are we learning something new about Gnosticism here that we haven't learned yet?
I think we are, actually. I think he's actually his presentation of his kind of like PKD theology, I guess you could say, has a lot more nuance in this than it did before. And I think it's just part of him learning new things, reading new things, and folding them in. A couple different things. One of the elements that I think he really revises in this is his notion of alternate realities. I think it was in the last book we read. Maybe it wasn't in Valis. It was in Radio Free Albermuth. I want to say it was in that one. He gave this image of fish tanks, different simultaneous realities. And on the far right side, there was a fish tank that was absolutely filthy. Nothing could live there. That was like the worst of all possible worlds. But then as you get progressively further, there's a different kind of moral status to each fish tank. And the fish become more and more complex. They move from bottom feeders to, healthier and healthier fish. And on the far left, on the final one, is the kind of heavenly fish tank where everything is good there. All good souls go to that fish tank. But in that book, he was saying that all of these realities are happening side by side because of the complex dance of the good God and the evil creator God working in tandem, rewriting reality, different parallel realities, which, as he's already said before, you can kind of zip zap between into different alternate histories. The Man in the High Castle being like an example of this sort of thing. Well, in this one, he has a different view of this. He's describing the idea that possibly these different realities, these different worlds, are actually more like being asleep, being entranced. It's this idea where actually it's not that the world, the fundamental ontological nature of the world itself has changed. It's that something else is controlling everything that we see, and it's controlling everything that we can remember, and it's also controlling everything that we think. So in a sense, our identities themselves have been erased. Because if you can control what someone sees, thinks, and remembers, you've rewritten over their identity entirely. So you have characters who, for half the novel, live in existence as, Elijah the prophet. And then for the other half of the novel, live in existence as a co-owner at a record store. You know what I mean? Uh, but when you do that, PKD says, you're actually robbing people of their entire existence. So the fundamental shift here is not that the universe itself has changed, it's that our epistemological understanding, our perceptions of the world are what is being blocked and manipulated, not the world itself. So that is a major update, I think, to his
being asleep and being certain that you are seeing what is real before you. That has been in many of the books now, and it feels like almost this would be maybe the completed version of the Three Sigmata of Palmer Eldritch, or at least the fear, the anxiety that the characters feel, and they decide, well, we have to stop him. This idea of a deity or a eldritch being or whatever it is taking over slowly so you can no longer recognize what is real or not. It feels like that has been so extended here that Yah, or God himself, has been banished. Like, does it feel a step further, or at least continuing on from that idea of Palmer Eldritch, where Yah is actually removed from the picture entirely?
Yeah, I think it's like, it is interesting that Yah is like physically somewhere else. He's in the material universe, but he's on another planet. I think that's something we've never seen before. Earth being a zone of evil that has just been under the control of Belial, Satan.
Mm-hmm.
Though, we need to talk about Xena because, gosh, and if you haven't figured it out already, this is we're going full spoilers on this one, but we need to talk about who Xena is, because she is the person who has actually imprisoned Belial in a zoo, which makes me wonder, this zone of evil stuff, was that established while Satan was behind bars, or was it somewhat there, and then once they free him, it fully expands? But maybe before we get to that, who is Xena?
Xena is someone who is seemingly growing up with Manuel, but older, and kind of leading Manuel or Emmanuel to recognize certain things about himself. And there are answers that she cannot say directly, because he will ask her very directly, like, am I God? Are you God? What's going on? She can only give him piece by piece by piece. So to me, she feels kind of like the hermit kind of character who will go along with you, or maybe almost like Gandalf. You can't divulge everything. You have to kind of lead someone towards their own answers. But otherwise, I can't really tell what Xena is.
Yeah. I mean, it's a total... Philip K. Dick thrives on ambiguities in his novel. He will tell you with a straight face that a person is a certain thing, and then 50 pages down the line, it will be this big shock that the person is actually something else. But he doesn't do it in a way that tells you this is the final word. He does it in a way where these characters are kind of thinking through and changing their minds in real time. So... yeah, first we're led to believe that Xena is just this precocious little girl with trickster eyes. She's another girl at this school for gifted children. I think it probably has a different title. School for Gifted Children is like an X-Men thing, isn't it? But neither here nor there. Neither here nor there. First, we're kind of led to believe that Xena might be like a pseudonym for Diana, the Greek goddess. And there are times when people look at her and she takes on that kind of aspect, the facial aspect of Diana. But then we're led to believe that Xena might be the word for fairy. So think of Edmund Spenser's The Fairy Queen, something like that. And it takes a kind of sinister turn, as the fairiness of it seems to have this feeling of intoxication, right? Yahweh seems to be all about truth, the revelations, what is the thing? What is the law? He seems to be a very literal God, but Xena seems to be all about beautification, making the world better, making the world more beautiful. And there's a sense in which we have to wonder, for example, opium makes the world more beautiful, but it doesn't actually change the world. And ultimately, if you if you become addicted to opium, I think that's a net loss, on all aspects of existence. So we're left in this state of where we start to wonder, okay, is Xena actually the devil? Is she the negative force in this world? And what we eventually learn is Xena is a part of the Godhead, that split apart long, long ago, thousands of years ago. She is Shekinah, which is another name for Malkuth. These are all terms from Kabbalah. So I'll probably put a tree of life somewhere up right here. So Malkuth being the 10th emanation of God, which is the same as Malkuth is like equivalent to the material world we live in. So it's the part of God that is within this material world that you could even say makes up the material world. When people say, oh, God is everywhere, God is everything, they're roughly kind of describing Malkuth. It's the godness that makes up all objects and all things in this world. So by remembering who he is and discovering who Xena is, there seems to be a final reunification. The Godhead is back together. We got the team back together and we're ready to go to war. Did I miss anything? I feel like I just rambled for God knows how long. Yeah.
It's got a very Children of Dune vibe, but now when they're coming together, they here's my question. So Children of Dune vibe, but earlier you're saying there is a tricksterishness. There's almost like she's got a kind of a Pan, the god of, everything, or the god of potential chaos. She has a close relationship with Belial because she's the one who goes and suggests, let's go to the zoo. And I think she's the one who says, let's let them out. I believe it's her who suggests that.
I thought it was him. It could, that's a really good thing. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So I thought that it was him being like, how unjust, all of these animals in cages, so against the Torah, so against the law. You know what I mean?
But she agrees, I believe. I think she's pushing him to do it. I feel like that there's kind of a strong connection between her and Belial. It reminds me a little bit of The Witch, Eggers' movie, the connection between the girl and the goat. Here she has a strong connection to the goat. They let him out and they know, and she knows what the goat is. So it does feel a little bit like there's a little bit of chaos in this bag.
Yeah.
In this relationship.
Isn't part of, they said what is it? So there's the image from the Greek world, the idea of God playing dice, or God, I guess it's with cow knuckle bones or something like that. Some kind of knuckle bones. God doesn't throw knuckle bones, I think is the thing. PKD repeats this idea a couple times, but it's from, an ancient Greek conception of God. I feel like they get back to this idea by saying that Yah, or Emmanuel, is the kind of law giving and law enforcing side of God. And Xena, or Shekinah Malkuth, is the playfulness of God. And I feel like it's difficult to discuss because I'm more familiar with the Christian traditions. You know what I mean? And I feel like this book has just sidestepped the entire Christian tradition. There's no Jesus in this book. There's no Christ. There's no Messiah. There's no Holy Spirit. There's no there's no tripartite division of God. There's no Trinity is the word I'm looking for. Yeah, it's an entirely Jewish theology of God. So it's a little bit harder to talk about, but I feel like, and I'm making a reach here, but I feel like Emmanuel is kind of like the Old Testament God, the wrathful deity. And even though PKD wouldn't agree with this, Xena strikes me as the more New Testament God, the one that says, actually, God is love. Actually, love thy neighbor. You know what I mean? Like the God that's more interested in mercy and forgiveness and just the overall beauty of lived experience.
I'd really like to know more about Malkuth and to see how Malkuth would be described, if it's going to be interested in the beauty of existence or if it is kind of tricksterish element. I want to look, though, because there are, in addition to these two major players, Xena and Emmanuel, there are kind of their helpers who are working like kind of in between human and in between divine, and they're confusing to me as well. I think one, we've had Linda a few times, but in different versions, even though there's really no exact connection to this and Valis and to Radio Free Albemuth, the same kinds of characters are reoccurring. And we have Linda at least twice, if not 3 times. And in this case, we have her as a pop star who's going to emerge, similar to Radio Free Albemuth. In this case, we have a vision of her being a like universe-wide, the biggest pop star that's ever been. And it seems like she is also kind of messianic. Even though we don't have a Christ in this story, she seems to be kind of half divine, half human.
Yeah. This was one of those great PKD ambiguities where when we're first introduced to her, she appears to be a kind of AI creation. And to me, honestly, this was actually the more like the idea that really got its hooks in me, because I think it's so relevant to the world we live in today. Let me read a quote because there's a really interesting idea that's expressed. It says, "The big noodle had first imagined the fox. The AI system had invented her, told her what to sing and how to sing it. Big noodle set up her arrangements, even down to the mixing, and the package was a complete success. Big Noodle had correctly analyzed the emotional needs of the colonists and had come up with a formula to meet those needs. The AI system maintained an ongoing survey, driving feedback. When the needs changed, Linda Fox changed. It constituted a closed loop. If, suddenly, all the colonists disappeared, Linda Fox would wink out of existence. Big Noodle would have canceled her, like paper run through a paper shredder." So, I mean, I can't think of a better character for like the world we live in today. I'll give you an example. I used to put on like Orthodox choir music while I like read or studied. Helped with the focus, But I realized pretty recently that most of these are just AI generated Orthodox choirs.
Oh no.
Yeah.
That's horrible.
Really took the wind out of my sails, and now I can't even listen to any of them. So it's this question of like, if we're living in a world where we're getting AI generated content spewed out to meet our emotional needs so that, our advertising dollars flow back to the corporations who make it. And then when our needs change, they, spit out new AI generated art to meet those needs. What do we do, Bob? What do we do about the Linda Foxes of the first iteration of Linda Foxes of this world?
What a scary world we're already in. There's a question we already have to ask ourselves now, Zach. I have a question for you about Big Noodle or Linda Fox. Which direction do you want to go in?
Let's stick with Linda
Throw the
Fox.
knuckles. Throw the knuckles. Okay. I want to come back to Big Noodle later because I'm really curious. Big Noodle is trying to kill God, which I thought was very interesting. But let's go to Linda Fox first. We find out, and I agree, that was so interesting, that Big Noodle has created this ultimate pop star, and it is all through surveys, all through feedback, and it will shift however Linda needs to appear. When she becomes a real character, what on earth is happening here? Is it just PKD forgetting what he's writing about? Is it a different universe bumping up into this universe created by an AI? Where has the real Linda Fox come from?
So they have that wager, right? The wager between Xena and Emmanuel, which to me was like an echo of God and the devil making a wager in Job. Yeah. Which for me, I was like, oh, this is it. Like Xena is truly the devil. Was it a weird wager for you? I mean, the idea, we're not exactly clear on what the wager is, but what we come to find out is it's, will Herb Asher still love Linda Fox if he recognizes that she is just a person? If he sees the human Linda Fox, like warts and all, recognizes that she's not, an idealized image, that she's not a pop star from the magazines, but she's just a person. I struggled a bit because it seemed to me like they were wagering, like, will he cheat on his wife or not? And I kind of rubbed me the wrong way a little bit. Like, I was like, what are God and what is Emmanuel and Xena doing with this wager? You know, it seems like they want him to cheat. It was very strange. Yeah. What did you make of it?
I didn't understand it at all because it's a success because he sleeps with Linda Fox to spoil it. But at the end, like that's the happy ending of the book. And for some reason, she seems to be, at least for him personally, he seems to think that she's the savior of the universe. But at least for him, she kind of is. I don't know.
There is I guess you could say, a transubstantiation that occurs. So by them creating this kind of false reality in which Linda Fox is now a person and not just a computer generated program, what they say is they've actually given substance to Linda Fox. So she actually becomes a person at that point. But then there's a kind of third transubstantiation, I guess we could say, that happens after that, where the kind of deification of Linda Fox. It turns out that she is not just a pretty lady who likes to sing, and some people say looks like a pizza waitress. No, she is a spiritual being from the Kabbalistic tradition. She is the Yetzer Hatav, the advocate, which, you know, I did a little research on this, but I'm clearly underread. But the idea is basically like you have an angel and a devil on your shoulder. I think that's kind of the vibe. So she is the advocate, the angel on the shoulder, and then there's the accuser, the Yetzer Hara, who is the devil on your shoulder. So for the advocate, it seems like it's finding the beauty in the world. It's the goodness. It's the things that, yeah. But for the accuser, it's the ugliness of the world. But it's hard to know what is PKD's spin on these ideas and what is the stuff coming from like oh my gosh, what is the book called? The Zohar.
The Zohar. Oh.
Yeah, yeah. It's hard because I've read some books on the Kabbalah, but it's like I've read the Hermetic Kabbalah, the magic stuff, the post Golden Dawn side of things, which is definitely its own thing as opposed to what's going on in this book.
Zach, we got another choose your own adventure. Should we talk about the devil or talk about the big noodle? Oh, I can't decide. Devil on my shoulder. I'll ask you about the devil because when Linda becomes a deity, she defeats the devil, it feels, because when they release Belial seems to infect Herb in the same kind of way, like in It, when It infects, I can't remember the kid's name, the murderous kid, and so It keeps talking to him, like the face on the moon, telling him to do things. Belial gets in his head and is instructing him, go to her house, do this, do that, leave a voice message on her answer machine, all of these weird things. And so he does it, but it seems like Belial wants to use him to infect Linda or to defeat Linda. And so Belial says, look, I'm a cute little goat. Bring me up as a present. She's going to love it, Also, it's kind of the same. A dead goat on a roof reminds me a lot of Android's Electric Sheep. But anyway, Belial's instructing him to do all these things. He shows up to Linda's house with Belial, and apparently she just touches Belial once. This is what he tells us. And Belial is vanished, banished, gone. Maybe Belial will come back, but by her very touch, she is able to defeat evil. So she kind of has become not just the angel on the shoulder, but also powerful enough to just tell that devil to go away.
Yeah. One thing I wasn't sure was the devil aware of her status as this kind of spiritual being when he wanted to corrupt her, when he was making him drive over to her house? Or was it simply to torment Herb Asher? Herb, I know you love Linda Fox, and I am going to go ruin her just to spite you.
Yes, it seems like it's more trying to control Herb, and we get a surprise of the transubstantiation of having this concept, this thing generated by the big noodle. We're going to work our way back to the big noodle. Thing generated by the big noodle and then turn into a real person. I think that was very interesting to have so much artificial intelligence, have it become something creating things that can then not just be slop in this case, but can be taken and turned into a real person. Or maybe Big Noodle was just creating an illusion the whole time and Linda Fox was already always already there. I can't tell.
One little piece of interesting factoid before we move on from Linda Fox. Linda Fox is supposed to be Linda Ronstadt, the singer. And I learned that Philip K. Dick was obsessed with Linda Ronstadt. His feelings about Linda Ronstadt were written into Herb Asher's character. Like he was writing her fan letters. He felt like he discovered her. He wrote to the record label being like, you got to sign Linda Ronstadt. Yeah. So about 10 minutes before we recorded, I was like, I should listen to Linda Ronstadt for the first time. And I got about 2 seconds in before I had the exact same reaction that Emmanuel had. Like, turn this off. This is death itself, death incarnate. But I listened to two whole songs, and I get the vibe. I can see why Philip K. Dick would be like, oh yeah, this is nourishing. This is beauty itself, but it's not for me, Bob. Linda Ronstadt is not for me. Yeah.
Okay. It's no.
Tell me about the big noodle. Tell me about that thing.
The big noodle. So I really like this idea of the big noodle. It's a AI that is so powerful, it kind of just controls the government. It controls all of these different pieces of the government. And one of the major plots is Yah trying to come back to a human world, and the big noodle and all of the attachments that come with the big noodle are trying everything they can to shoot down the ship, capture them, revoke their visas, force them into a hospital procedure, all of these really dangerous things, because it is telling us that Yah is evil, and Yah, I believe this is what the big noodle believes, is Yah is evil, and Yah is going to introduce evil back into the world, which the big noodle seems to have not eradicated, but seems to have controlled. And bringing Yah back in is going to break all of that control. So I just thought it was so interesting. AI is willing to destroy God.
Yeah. The big noodle seems to, and the world the big noodle has created seems to be taking the place of the Black Iron Prison, described so well in Valis and not quite Ubik, but Radio Free Albemuth for sure. We get this idea that Rome never ended, and it seems clear that this idea of Rome's mutation into the present world is now this idea of, what do we have? We have the Catholics and the we have a world government that's a coalition between the Christians, people of Islam, and the communists, I believe, but all maintained by this AI, this godlike AI system. One of the ideas that I thought was really interesting was that anything within the zone of evil, like from the perspective of the zone of evil, anything outside is evil. So they don't realize that they're evil, but they are. But they can't recognize goodness.
Feels very much like some of the other Gnostic books we've been reading, like Voyage to Arcturus, where a lot of the characters there will say, oh no, I'm the good one. The people who you were just with, they were the evil ones. Here's an extra eyeball, and here's an extra tentacle for your belly button. Follow me, and everything will be all right. So it feels quite similar. It feels very Gnostic, I guess, this idea of not knowing that you're in an illusion, that you think you're the good one here. And it makes me wonder about back to Valis, because Valis, we're told, is we can't tell if it's a good thing or not at the beginning of either Radio Free Albemuth or Valis. Eventually we come away with feeling like it maybe is God, or it has extremely good intentions, or it's trying to help just good things happen. Here we get a very direct answer from Elias, also Elijah, and it's hard to tell. Is this just Elijah is under the illusion and calling Valis bad, or is this the truth? There's a conversation between Emmanuel and Elijah where Emmanuel asks him directly, what is Valis? Elijah says this: an artificial satellite that projects a hologram that they take to be reality. That's everyone in the world, essentially. Then he says, it's really a reality generator. And then Emmanuel says, is the reality genuine? No, it's a hologram. It can make them see whatever it wants them to see. That's the whole point of the film. It's a study of the power of illusion. Then going back to the idea of the film in Radio Free Albemuth. But this time, Valis is being, again, pointed out as a false thing, whereas in Valis, they call Valis a real thing.
Yeah. Yeah, there seems to be some, I don't want to say, it's not confusion, but there's ambiguity. I think it's ambiguity. I think he's not that interested in clearing it up. I think maybe, yeah, you know? I mean, Valis is rewriting reality, right? If we think back to what Valis does, it rewrites reality at the same time as the, he calls it the programmer, but then there's also the counter programmer. Both of them are making changes to reality. The counter programmer making worse changes to reality, and the programmer making better changes to reality. That language isn't in Valis. That's in one of his essays that we read in The Shifting Realities of Philip K. Dick. Can't remember which one at this moment, but for some reason that terminology really stuck with me. But yeah.
I'm curious then, Zach. I think I want to see in the next book whether Valis is going to be evil or not, because Belial seems to describe itself, what it wants to do. When we're coming near the end of this book, and right before Belial is defeated by Linda Ronstadt, Belial tells us what it wants to do, and it sounds similar to Valis rewriting reality. And I know it might just be that evil counterplayer, going up against Valis, but they seem to have really similar goals, because Belial says that I will roam the world, expanding into it until I fill it. That is my right. Also a little bit like Palmer Eldridge. But then Belial is talking about the original light and the creation of the world. He says, the light that shone originally was a spurious light. The light is going out, and the true nature of reality is disclosed in its absence. That light blinded men to the real state of things. It is my job to reveal that real state, gray truth. The goat creature is speaking about this. And it's the gray truth that is better than anything Yahweh imagined.
Yeah, this is his second to last finished or second to last published book. He has The Island Daylight is unfinished. I don't know if it was ever actually published, but I'm excited to learn if there is a final word. You know what I mean? Do we get the final word in the transmigration of Timothy Archer? Or is it just more speculation? Is it all still a work in progress? Would it have still been a work in progress if he had lived 20 more years? I sincerely doubt it would have ever reached a final culmination. You know what I mean? He seems like the kind of person who's always searching and folding in and rewriting and, transmuting, transubstantiating his worldview.
We never got the final bird with the Island Daylight, but maybe we'll get the final word with the transmigration of Timothy Archer, Zach.
Beautiful. I'll talk to you later, Bob.
I'll see you in the pink light.